connections all the time that there was a ship. Many of y'all know about the Amistad. The Amistad. We applaud the Amistad. We talk about the great Amistad. But there was a case before the Amistad that went to the Supreme Court. And it was not victorious in some eyes. Because what happened, I should let you know, the Amistad was caught off of an area called Amelia Island. Did I not feel about Amelia Island earlier? Amelia Island. And then was taken to a place called Savannah, Georgia, the Antelope. And so the Antelope is now taken from Amelia Island, Fernandina Beach, taken to Savannah, Georgia, and now they will have these Africans on the ship, and now you have Spain and Portugal now arguing who should have the property of those Africans. Then you had individuals also saying they should have the property of the Africans, members of the United States government. So the case goes to the Supreme Court, and finally the Supreme Court says, guess what? We're going to divide up the Africans. Some of them will become property, and others will be able to be free. And those folks will be free. The ones who are able to have the benefit of freedom will leave out of Savannah, Georgia, and go to a place, in some areas called New Georgia. Located at one time, they had a place called Savannah, and a place called Liberia. So again, connections. That's why I say at GeecheeKonda, we celebrate Liberia's Independence Day, July 26th. Oh, I need to ask this question. Do any of y'all know what is the first African republic in the world?
Haiti. Liberia.
No, wrong. It is Haiti. Again, and because we celebrate Haiti's Independence Day also in August, we celebrate Haiti. Haiti is the first African republic in the world. And the second one is Liberia. That's why we celebrate July 26th. Now, as people know me, I tell, watch out for the Liberians. They think they're the best Africans of all of us. And that's our GeecheeKonda family members right there. And so we throw that up there because, again, we want people to understand. When you look at Haiti and look at Liberia, that's the best of us right there. When you understand that, that's the best of us, and we must always shower attention upon them properly and never let anybody try to put them down. Because what you don't understand about Haiti, they never wanted Haiti to be a shining example for Africans in the Americas. Because again, Haiti represented independence. The mother of independence in the Americas was not the U.S. It was Haiti. Because what you know in South America, Central America, those things would never be free if it was not for Haitians helping them out with money, printing presses, weapons, and men. Haiti set the course for freedom. And then when we look to Africa, we go and look and see Liberia. We see Liberia as an example because we see African people from right here who will now go to Liberia and help lay a foundation there too. That we must applaud Liberia. And then, those of you who call yourselves Pan-African, you know you got to identify with Liberia. Not because of Garvey, but because of somebody else who brings all of us together no matter what our spiritual foundations are. That is Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, who's right there in Savannah, Georgia, where he talked about one sermon he gave in the 1800s. He said that God is a Negro. Basically, God is an African. And some people not understanding that when he said that, black folks at times, when they were holding church services on Sundays, this is what they were told. They said, you don't pray to God, you pray to me. Your life, your food, your clothing are tied to me. So when they're holding church services, some of your ancestors, they were not praising God, but they were praising the folks who held them in captivity. And guess what happened? When they got their freedom, some of them were still identified as those folks who held them in captivity. They had not lost the shackles off of their bodies, but still had it in their minds, in their heads, and in their hearts. And so Bishop Turner came along in the 1890s also, and to another sermon, he said that all races on the planet identified the bomb themselves except the Negro. He said as long as the Negro think that God is white, they will always think that the devil is black and think that they favor the devil. So he preached some in the 1800s and 1900s. He is the reason why the AME Church got so heavily involved with regards to mission work in Africa, Central, and South America. The father of Pan-Africanism, liberation theology. And he was a proponent of Liberia. And he was right there in Savannah, Georgia. And many of us not even understanding that people who write about Garvey, they're going to say, Jamal, we had to come back to Savannah because of Turner. And so we have Dr. Patrick Burrowes, again, a writer on Liberia, part of the family. We say, welcome. Yeah. See, y'all being like, y'all better understand that. Stop so long.
I just want to say how I feel so much at home, since I arrived, I've been walking around, taking everything in, because there's so much that reminds me of life in Liberia and the connection that we share. What I would like to do is to start first with some background. If you know anything about West Africa, you know that there are many languages and there are many different ethnic groups, right? People have clustered in different parts of the continent, in different parts of West Africa, under different labels. But what we know now is that all of the ancestors of the people now living in West Africa originated in the area that is now called the Sahara. And that might sound to you far-fetched because we think of the Sahara as a desert. But the truth is that at the time they were there, the Sahara was a green area with 4 rivers running through it and a lake. How do we know this? Because people who have gone and dug in the desert under the sand have found the bones of whales and alligators and other animals that cluster where you have large bodies of water. So our ancestors were living in that region of the Sahara, and then something happened. Something we call climate change. And when that climate began to change and the green of the Sahara turned to desert, people had a choice. You could either stay and die, or you flee and find refuge. And so what happened then is that Africans from the Sahara went in 3 directions. There were some who went along the coast of West Africa, closest to the Atlantic Ocean. There were some who went down the middle, and there were others who went around the other side, inland, right, but away from the ones who had gone down the middle. The ones who went down the middle hit the River Niger. And if you know anything about history, you know that most of the dominant kingdoms or empires that we know about, like Kemet, ancient Egypt, grew up on the Nile. They grew up on a river, because with a river, you have the water you need for sustenance, for agriculture. You have the fertilizer from the rich soil that is deposited by the rivers. And so those who went down the middle, they hit the Niger River, and they settled there, and they began to expand. Their population grew, because they had all of what they needed there, right, to survive. You have fish, you have rich soil for agriculture, and the domesticated animals. And so those in the middle constitute the group we know as the Malinke. They were at the core of the Mali Empire that some of the adults here might have heard about, and perhaps some of the youth as well. The Mali Empire. The Mali Empire, most of us remember it because the ruler of the Mali Empire at one time was Mansa Musa. Mansa meaning ruler of Mali. And so Mansa Musa was governing an empire at the time that was the source of gold for most of the world. At the time, many European countries along the Mediterranean had coins that were minted in gold. Those who are old enough might know that there has been a controversy in the U.S. for some people who argue we should go to the gold standard, because that was once the standard. You follow? That was common. But at that time, the countries that had coins in gold, including the Arabs who had the dinar, and the Spanish and the Italians, they didn't have gold in their territories. So the gold they were getting was from West Africa. Mansa Musa leaves Mali on a pilgrimage on his Hajj to Mecca. And he stops over in Cairo. And the brother goes shopping along with his entourage, and they drop so much gold in the markets of Cairo that the entire world market of gold collapsed.
Yes, sir.
The price just collapsed. Why? Because now, where we had a shortage, and shortages will drive the price up, there was so much gold that the price of it fell down. And this all came from our region in West Africa. So the Malinke were in the center of West Africa, and they were at the heart of these empires. But with an empire, you usually don't have one group of people, you have other folks who are also incorporated in it. The group that went towards the left from where I'm standing and came down to Liberia are known as the Kru, the Bassa, their descendants. The Kru, Bassa, some of those names you might have heard. The Kru in particular are well known because they were maritime, they created a maritime culture. They were on the water. They knew the ocean forwards and backwards. You see, let me share something with you. Too often, our history is presented as if it happened to us, rather than it's something that we helped to create. And so we were taught in school, when I was a youth, that the Portuguese discovered Liberia in 1450. A Portuguese navigator came around the coast, right, inching his way down and found where Liberia was. Why? The Portuguese knew from the Arabs that the gold that was flooding the market was coming down from somewhere there in West Africa, and they were looking for the source of it. But the other thing they were looking for is a spice that was so precious in Europe at the time. People called it the spice of paradise. Some of you who may have visited cities up north, DC, New York, etc., may know that there's a chain of restaurants right now that is expanding across the world, and it's called Nando's Peri Peri. And if you go to any of these restaurants, it's a chicken restaurant. They specialize in chicken. They roast chicken, they grill chicken, and all the chicken they make has this seasoning that they call peri peri. Well, the company, the base of this franchise, this restaurant chain, is out of South Africa. But what they call peri peri is what was once called Malangetta pepper. So that Malangetta pepper was actually in the area occupied by the Kru, the group that I call the Kru. You may have heard that word, you might know about that group, because when Maya Angelou did her famous poem on the Mall at the inauguration of Bill Clinton, she read that poem about the morning, and she cited the Kru in that poem. Maya had lived in West Africa. She knew the groups that she was speaking about. So the Kru and their cousins came down on this side, hit the coast. They were there when the Portuguese came. They had already developed a network of a fleet of canoes, etc., that were trading back and forth along the coast. They knew the river like the ocean and all, like the back of your hand. So the Portuguese come. They had spent years navigating slowly. What the prince that sponsored their voyages told them was, you go not too far, map the place, write down what you see, come back, and the next guy will go a little further than you did. You follow? So they finally made it around the bulge of West Africa to the area of Liberia, and now the problem begins. Because you see, when you're coming down the coast, you have the benefit of a current. The current is flowing, it is taking you, if you will, if you hit that current. Do you follow? So they were in that current, and they had their sails, but then you get down to that area where Liberia is, and Cote d'Ivoire, and Sierra Leone. How do you get back? They had no idea. And so the Portuguese would load their ships up with Malangetta or gold, and then when they tried to go back against that current, the ships would crash. So if you go to the historical records, you'll hear about all of these wrecks that occurred along the coast of West Africa until they began interacting with the Kru, and the Kru who knew the Atlantic Ocean. This was our ocean. They may have had something up in Europe that connected with it, but this was ours. We lived with it. And so the Kru ended up sharing with them what they ended up using to then reach domination of the world. And that was the ocean, Atlantic Ocean off the coast of West Africa, it has two rivers running in it, or currents, if you will. One current flows to the east and is closest to the coast. But if you know the ocean and you go out a couple of miles, there's another current that goes the opposite way. And once the Portuguese found that out, they could go as far as the Congo or wherever, collect whatever they needed, and then go back out and get in that other current, and it would help to take them back. You follow?
Yes.
So now we hear about the trade winds and the various currents of the Atlantic. Europeans learned this from some of our ancestors who had been there and had mastered the Atlantic Ocean. But the group that I want to talk about is not the group that gave rise to the cruise, and it's not the group that went in the center and gave rise to the Mali Empire. The group I want to talk to you about today is the group that shares languages that are called the Atlantic languages in Africa, in West Africa. Atlantic only because they're close to the coast of the Atlantic. You follow me?
Yes.
Now, some of you may have heard these names before. These are groups that belong to the Atlantic family of languages. Wolof.
Yes.
Wolof from Senegal.
Yes.
And there's Jollof rice, which is derived from Wolof.
Yes.
Okay. So, I hope you might be getting a pattern. I have this Coca-Cola with me, not because I'm being paid to advertise it. Yeah, I'm a little thirsty, but there's also a point that I hope I can come back to. All right. So here we were. There's a group called the Atlantic Group, and they're going along the coast, and they include the Wolof. You go down further, and you get all the way to Liberia. That is the southernmost point of the Atlantic languages. And what do we have? The Geechee and the Gullah. Yes. Now, what was unique to this Atlantic family? A couple of things. Well, one of them that was distinctive was they domesticated rice. We were told when I was in school that, oh no, everything regarding agriculture, anything that involved settled life, we borrowed it from somebody from somewhere. Oh, rice, no, it came from China. Oh, rice, no, it came from Arabia. No. I can say to you conclusively, based on science, that the rice that was cultivated in Africa was domesticated in Africa, and it was domesticated by the ancestors of those who spoke the Atlantic languages. So Europeans arrive on the coast, and they find that here you have this group of folks who are growing a commodity that is strange. Europeans don't know about rice. Now, things get to a point. We're going to take a turn. And that turn is the development of the enslavement of African people and their transportation to the New World. So Europeans are now getting hold of large numbers of Africans. They're packed into these ships. How do you feed them? There are certain things that are available that could be options. We have something we call cassava. It's a root. Some people call it manioc. Some people call it yucca. Yes, the Spanish oftentimes call it that. It's a root. It's a root. You can cook it and so forth. But if you put cassava on a ship, after a few days or so it might rot. If you put any of the other root plants like potatoes, it might rot. And so the Europeans said, oh, this rice, we could buy this rice up, load the ship, and rice, once it's dry, it doesn't go bad. Until you add water, and then you cook, and you eat it right away, it doesn't spoil. All right. So now they start buying up this rice, and that's what they're feeding our ancestors as they're being brought to the New World. And look, and guess what? As a result of that, there are so many countries in the Americas where descendants of African people have a diet that includes rice and maybe some beans. And that's true in Louisiana. It's true where my parents came from in Jamaica. then they hit on the idea that instead of paying these Africans for the rice, what we ought to do is to focus on enslaving people who know how to grow rice, and then we can take them to the New World, and then they can grow rice for free. And so what we're going to do is we grow rice in swampy areas, so we will take them, the descendants of this Atlantic tradition, and deposit them in South Carolina, in South Georgia, in Louisiana, swampy areas, and let them grow it. So it's not by chance that the core of the community in this area are known today as Gola or Geechee, because the core consisted of the Geechee and the Gullah from Liberia. Now, the Geechee are known by their neighbors who don't belong to that family that I was talking about. They're known to their neighbors as the white people. See the connection? And here we are in Riceboro. But not only that, the other thing that Geechee was famous for throughout West Africa was their blacksmithing. Again, we have been told in school that anything related to technology comes from somewhere else. And that we Africans have picked it up from somewhere. But the reality is, and we come to know this now, that Africans independently discovered how to smelt iron, and were doing it before any European came. And among the ones who did it the best, and everybody knew this, were the Geechee. So people turned to the Geechee with the blacksmith for the needs that he had for iron, for implements, and so forth. But what the Geechee had too was actually a currency made out of iron, like some people make gold or they make, what have you, made out of iron that we call pennies that circulated throughout portion of West Africa. All right. Now, I'll leave you with this idea, this thought. Again, pushing back on the narrative that we or our ancestors, pretty much history acted on us, really act on it. If I ask you, what's the common drink that a lot of Asian people have? If you go to a Chinese restaurant and you sit down and they offer you water, they might offer you something else. Would you like some green tea? And that's true not just in China, but in Thailand, in India, throughout that part of Asia, right? People drink tea. Some drink black tea, some drink green tea. Are you doing this? Yeah. All right, I don't want you to think I'm making this stuff up. All right, so you come now to the continent of Africa, and what do you have? Well, in East Africa, especially in Ethiopia, once called Abyssinia, coffee was discovered and domesticated. And so coffee is an integral part of Ethiopian culture. If you're lucky to have friends who are from Ethiopia and they invite you over for coffee, take that invitation. Take it. Because it's not just, hey, let's pour some water on some coffee. It's a ceremony. It's a ritual. It's very instant. It's deep. You follow? So the Ethiopians, of course, the Arabs come in contact with them. They start drinking coffee. You can't get enough of it. It goes to Turkey. From Turkey, it goes to France. Boom. Europeans discover coffee now. Okay. But in West Africa, we don't drink tea. And we don't usually drink coffee. Coffee is a thing we could use for us recently. What we had, and we still do, are the seeds of a plant that grows on the northern end of Liberia. And that plant is called the cola tree. Cola nut. And so what the Gola people discovered was that the seeds of this plant, and when I say discover, those of you young people in here, I want you to think about this. If you find something that falls from a tree, or a tree, how do you rule out whether this can be eaten, what properties does it have. That's a process, right? It doesn't just drop from the sky and hit you on the head. Somebody's got to study it. And so the Gola studied this plant. And what they discovered was that cola is a stimulus, but it also suppresses your thirst. So it allows you to survive without water for a while. And what the Gola did then was to begin a trade with people who were living in the areas close to the desert, who needed a thirst suppressant.
All right.
And cola, as a result, came to dominate the cultures of West Africa. Don't take my word for it. You know, you have West African friends, ask them. If you came to visit, traditionally what I'll do is take a cola seed, split it, give you a piece, and I have a piece. It's like, here.
Yeah.
Take another little piece of my heart now. Oh, that's too old school for you. Okay. So, but it's like, yeah, we're sharing, right? This is we're in this together. But cola is a part of that. If one goes, well, I went back to Liberia after the war. My dad's grave had not been, taken care of in the absence of the family. And I go back there to clean it and to honor him. And the tradition is you go and you take a piece of cola and you chew it, just not to take the juices out of it, but just chew it enough, because he is now spirit, and spirit have no teeth. And so what you want to do is to just show the honor, the respect, by saying, listen, I understand. You don't have what you need to process for yourself. I'm doing it for you, as your child. And I'm giving it to you to say, I remember you. You follow? Yes. I'm honoring you. And I'm sorry for the time that I was away, when nobody was here to watch the grave, to clean it, and to do what was right. So cola is embedded in the cultures of West Africa. So the point I wanted to leave you with is that the connections are deep. It's not by coincidence we share similar names of those groups that I talked about, right? And that we are at a point, an important point, where those connections need to be recognized and furthered and developed. I walked in here, I was invited by a good friend of mine, Emmanuel, who lives in this area, and he wanted me to come up right away. He said, we've got the program flowing and we're hoping that you can come up and speak. I had to take in what I was seeing. The first thing that hit me was the blacksmith, working over there. And I was like, oh my God, here we go again. This is like a West African village. The blacksmith's workshop was like a sacred space.
Yes, sir.
You couldn't have a dispute in that place. It was not allowed, it was not acceptable. Because you could interfere by your negative energy with the smelting of this important metal. You follow me? Yeah. And so, for all of those reasons, I am so enthusiastic and pleased to have come. And I hope that this is not just a one-time visit, but that we will continue
Coca-Cola
to bond. And the reason I brought the can with me was to just show you. Here we have a major corporation who was able to build their empire on the basis of an African discovery, something your ancestors and mine were the first to discover.
That's right.
To learn the chemical properties of it, the effects it had on the human body. And then Europeans come hundreds of years later and said, oh yeah, we can use that. And they bottled it up. They don't use the actual cola anymore. They make an artificial substitute. But the idea is still the same. Suppress your thirst, you follow? So you can go a little longer without a drink. But thank you for having me and for listening. I really appreciate it.
Brother Patrick Burrowes. Again, another round of applause for our brother, Dr. Patrick Burrowes. what he brought up when he said that when he came here, it felt like it was a West African village, a community. Kunda means compound, family compound, and that goes to Africa. A Saracole word that again means compound. And so we're right here in the family compound. It's been a wonderful day, and you all now see the veranda. Also, the veranda goes back to Africa. We're glad to have y'all here. We're going to transition. Sister Imani, where's Sister Imani? Sister Imani, who's a part of GeecheeKonda families. Not that Imani. No, not Imani Warren, not Bocab. Again, that's our princess, our queen. So again, she's going to be Savannah State Tiger. We got some haters in here from another university, but this Savannah State Tiger's over here. Right? My sister Imani has a film that's dedicated to the ancestors. I don't know if I'm going to go there, but I guess we probably should go out and find out where it's going to be done. So, yeah, 15 minutes, we'll go to that. Then we're going to have